I can officially start talking. Good to go? All right. Welcome, everybody, to Season 2, Episode 23 of Motivate Me 313's podcast. Today, we have another important conversation out there for all of you to listen to and to watch if you're listening to it or watching it live. Let me go ahead and introduce everybody that's here with me today. First of all, back in the studio is little sis Sada Thabit. Sada's back. Want to give her a round of applause. Happy to have her back. We had her on Zoom last week, but she's officially back this week in the studio. It's been a while, Sada, so it's nice to have you here. And then to the left of me, you got big sis Abid Thabit in the building. I think she's checking her notes one last time to make sure she got everything rolling. And then we got Rabija in the building, Hamtramck High School grad right here, Rabija in the building. Happy to have her here today. And then we have her friend Laura as well. All right, yes, definitely a round of applause. So today's topic, we're going to be talking about grief and loss. Very important conversation for everybody in the world, but especially for like our communities. I feel like we struggle to have these conversations, to talk about these kind of things when they happen. So talking to Rabija, we thought that it would be a great idea to cover this topic. So I'm glad that we are able to do that. But before I get into anything or what it is that we're going to be talking about, be sure to subscribe to our pages. You got YouTube, Oz Media, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok under Oz Media. You can listen to the show later on Apple and Spotify podcasts under Oz Media. And if you want to call in, the number is 313-306-1750. Again, 313-306-1750. Feel free to call in. You want to chime in on anything that we're talking about. I got the phone right here next to me. I'll answer the phone, and you can be connected and have a conversation with the whole panel here. We want to give a shout out to our sponsors, the Balkan House, Hanley International Academy, Qahwa House, and BC Adhesives. We got to go ahead and give a shout out to the Balkan House. We were talking about the commercial that we had, where Rabia's sister was also one of the people that were demonstrating to us I forgot the dance. The folklore dance. So shout out to that. Definitely had a good time. So go ahead, Ramsey, and give a shout out to the Balkan House Restaurant. And then we're going to go ahead and get this show on the road. The Balkan House Restaurant. The Balkan House Restaurant is famous for their doner kebab sandwich. But did you know that the Balkan House now serves breakfast? Did you also know that all their food is 100% halal? The Balkan House now also have 2 food trucks, so you can book your next party or event with the Balkan House on wheels. Their Hamtramck location is 3028 Kniff Street, Hamtramck, Michigan. Their Ferndale location is 314 West 9 Mile Road, Ferndale, Michigan. Again, you can book their food trucks for your next party or event. So if you're looking for a nice place to eat with friendly service and great prices, look no further than the Balkan House restaurants. All right. So first of all, let's start off with, Sada, how you feel back? Everything good, ready to go?
Yeah, I'm excited. It's been too long. The sea has missed me. I've missed the sea. And I'm ready to, jump back into these conversations and meet new people and just, good vibes.
For sure. And Abid, how you feel? Everything good?
Good. Just, after a long day of work and after school, I'm a little bit tired, but, I enjoyed these conversations.
Yeah, it's my first day back in office, too, so I'm a little, tired.
First day having to show up?
Yeah, but I know this conversation will for sure, keep me going, yeah.
Yeah. Well, Rabija, can you go ahead and tell the audience a little bit about yourself? What is it that you do growing up? Anything you'd like to mention right now? It's all right now on you, Rabija.
Yeah, so I am from Hamtramck. I graduated from Hamtramck High School. I went on to Wayne State, where I got my bachelor's and my master's in social work. I have experience primarily in the healthcare setting. Currently, I work at a private dialysis clinic in the Metro Detroit area. And that's what I've been doing. I have twin babies. They're actually 4 toddlers. And that's about that. Yeah.
That's a job in itself.
I know, right? I read a thing the other day. It's like when a mom comes to work, she's not first coming to work. She's done like 5 other jobs before she's actually come to work. And I'm like, that's...
And twins?
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah, thank you.
And then we have Laura here. Laura, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do and stuff like that?
Yeah, so I got my bachelor's from Oakland University in sociology, and then I went on to Wayne State, graduated 2018 with my master's in social work with Rabija. And then from there, I've been working in the healthcare system. I'm a social worker working in the healthcare system as well. I have experience with all different populations and diagnoses, but right now, primarily, it's oncology.
Nice, nice. And by the way, they're both clinical social workers, so that's why they're here today. Again, our topic is about grief and loss. We didn't want to just bring people on that were just going to sit here and we're just going to talk about stuff without backing it up with, research or, being insightful with what it is that they share and experience as well. So that's why I'm glad that we have both of you here today. So we're not just talking, we're actually going to be backing it up with facts and stuff like that. So thank you for both being here today. Again, this is a conversation that is much needed in our community. Every community needs a topic that, when something happens sudden in your life, how to cope with it and how to deal with it. So I guess my first question is, what are some reasons or even less obvious reasons? Because when you hear grief and loss, the first thing you think of is like maybe death, right? So maybe some less obvious reasons, obviously the more obvious ones as well, that people may experience in life which may lead to grief or a grieving period in their lives. Laura, we can even start with you.
Well, the obvious reasons you said are death, but also I think that any big major life change can lead to grief. I mean, loss of a relationship, divorce, loss of a job, loss of a certain lifestyle or independence, all of that can lead to a grieving period.
Anything you want to add on to that, Rabija?
Yeah, so, the less obvious reasons, like Laura mentioned, death is primarily like the one that people think about right away when you say that you're grieving something. Like for me, example, like when I became a mom, I had to grieve a part of my identity that was no longer there, right? So like here's this whole entire shift in my life and my perspective. And, they talk about postpartum loss or postpartum depression. They talk about like how you might be feeling, but they don't talk about like who you are as a person, right? And then you have to try to recreate like your identity. And that's something that like not a lot of people talk about to you. And I think that's like one of the more unobvious reasons of grief and grieving. And, you have little griefs every day. Like you could go somewhere and something might happen and you could be grieving something that you think is not even, worth it or worth mentioning. But, it's just, it can impact you in a certain way.
Does anyone, I just want to make sure, what is the exact definition of grief? I want to make sure so people can know. I don't want to define, do you know, the exact definition of it? Because I wonder if that has a lot to do with some of the answers that we even going to look up and stuff. Do you have it in front of you right now? Ivan, are you looking that up right now? Go ahead.
Grief is experienced in the face of loss, especially losses that helped you from your identity, form your identity,
See,
which
look
basically
at
what they
that.
said.
Yeah.
All right.
Great. There you go. There you
Didn't
go.
even know that. I mean,
in a nutshell.
right. You think right? Like you have a general concept of it, but we essentially put that in a nutshell. So.
Yeah.
100%, literally.
Literally.
No, that's great. That's great. And so basically like a loss of identity in a time period where you're probably struggling and can't be your normal self.
Right.
Because people can make your identity, your job could be your identity,
Right.
the way you grew up. Like there's so many different aspects
Right.
that get put into who you are.
Right.
So
Right.
So my next question is the one where we're going to kind of dive into it. Have you ever lost someone that may have led to a grieving period in your life, and how did you deal with it? And obviously, people don't feel like sharing. It's one of those questions where it might be personal, but if you don't feel like sharing, you don't have to share. Does anybody want to start off with that would want to mention it right now, or?
I think my big one was my dad. And that kind of is what led me into social work and led me into working in healthcare, because I remember my dad got diagnosed with, it's a type of cancer called multiple myeloma, and it's one of the blood cancers. It's pretty serious. And he ended up in the ICU. This was back in 2015, 2016. We were brand new in grad school. And I had to make all of his medical decisions for him. He ended up being intubated in the ICU with multiple issues. And intubated is when you're putting on a ventilator to help assist with breathing. And he was maxed out on all of the settings. He couldn't keep his blood pressure up, so all of his blood pressure medicines were at the max he could ever receive. He was in kidney failure. He needed constant dialysis. I mean, my dad was dying. And I think I was 23 at the time, making life and death decisions on my dad, without any other family to support me because, you know, my dad didn't have a big family. He didn't have a lot of people that were around. So when I was his eldest daughter, and how other people in my family grieved was, I'm just not going to deal with this and I'm going to walk away. But I couldn't walk away because I was raised to say, when your parent gets sick, you take care of them. So when I had to make him a DNR, which is do not resuscitate. I had to make that decision for him, and just feeling like, am I doing the right thing? Because I don't know. I don't know if this is the right thing to do for my dad. We never talked about it. And is this decision going to kill him, is what I remember thinking. So all in all, after this ICU stay, thankfully, through God or through grace, he got somewhat better. He was able to live for about 2 more years until he passed away, but he really wasn't mentally still the same. He was always kind of a little off after that. But that was the big grief in my life, where I realized, you know, why am I doing this? Why was I put in this situation? And it was to serve and help others, to go into healthcare and meet with people in the exact same situation that I was in and help them.
I have a question for you, because you mentioned something in your answer, and you mentioned that for some of your family members, you know, I don't want to deal with this, was their grieving, like how they reacted to the situation. Is that okay?
I think it's okay for the person, because it was my brother who reacted like that. And I think that was normal for him. And that's how he deals with a lot of issues in his life. And so you kind of have to understand, you know, if this is your family, I have to take that with grace. I have to understand that this is how he's coping with this, and vice versa. He should understand that this is how I'm coping with it as well.
Was it frustrating for you though, or? Okay.
Oh, for sure.
That's
For
what I was
sure.
gonna say. So for you as the person, how did that make you feel, though, as the sister, you know, in this
As
situation?
a sister, I was annoyed, but you know, but then I have to take a step back and say, you know what, this is his journey as well. It's not just about me.
Yeah. Some people, when they're going through, you know, grief, loss, stress, depression, they can disassociate, right? So they can shut down, drown themselves in work, not pay attention to little details, you know. So her brother's reaction is completely normal, because that's just the way of how he was coping with it. Now, will he have to address, or he probably has addressed by now, you know, the loss of his dad, but those people just tend to take time to get to that stage.
Yeah, I remember. So our dad passed away as well 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago.
Very similar.
Very, very similar. In 2001, he had an open heart surgery. And that was the first time, like, my dad was very strong, you know, and I'm going to say I'm a daddy's girl, so. And that was the first time, like, I remember when he was in the ICU after the surgery and he couldn't respond. I remember being like 11 at the time, and it was so hard for me. Like, it was like the hardest thing that I've ever faced. But then since then, he stopped working, so he was home a lot. But since you remember, if you're thinking 2001, so it's 20 years, 21 years of him being, you know, not the normal dad that, you know, we grew up with.
Right.
And then, you know, through those years, he was in the hospital, in and out, and I would always go with my mom. We'd take turns, and, you know, my siblings. But I remember the last time he was in the hospital, it was so hard for me to go. It was, I don't know what, like, my feet were, like, I couldn't, like, obviously I went, and he wasn't responding as well.
He was.
But it was like, before it would be like normal, but we'd switch shifts and whatever, it was like a thing, but it was so hard. And our oldest brother, he's a pharmacist, so he did most of the decisions when it came to his medical decisions. But thank God for that, because I feel like no one wants to be in that position. You know what I'm saying? So I kind of understand both situations. But yeah, like, when you know, it's like, I don't know, it was difficult for sure. And there's 8 of us, you know. So, I don't know if I made any sense.
No,
Totally
you make sense.
Total
You do,
sense,
because
yes.
Laura and I were touching on this earlier, how you can already, so you mentioned your dad had the surgery in 2001, and for 20 years, he was, you know, not himself entirely. So essentially, within those 20 years, you were already in a grieving process.
Yeah.
You were.
You were, because like, it's like when somebody goes and is really, really sick, and you know that they're gonna go at any moment, you're already grieving.
Yeah.
So that person hasn't even left. And you're already starting the process of like, oh God, this is really happening. Like, I'm going to lose this person. And like, we were talking about this yesterday, like, it's okay when someone's gone through such a prolonged suffering, because it is suffering. It's suffering for them, that you're just like, ugh, like you can breathe, right? Like it's some people
It's
will
relief.
feel, yeah.
It's
Some people
relief.
might feel guilty
Yeah.
to say like, oh my gosh, a weight was like lifted. Like in my language, we have a thing where we say when someone was going through prolonged suffering, when they pass, we say they were born, right? So like they were born, they're like no longer suffering. They're now at peace. They're no longer having to go through the pain that they went through. And it's completely okay and normal for some, for others to feel relief or to feel like they're no longer suffocating themselves, because it is a lot to carry with you. It is a lot.
Yeah. For us, obviously, our father was one. I think the first one that probably hit all of us in our family was our cousin when she, passed through drowning. It was so shocking. Like,
I remember that.
Yeah.
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 So like that was something that threw everybody off. Like it was like, imagine, just going to the park and then you're hearing this, and so like that period of time was like the first real. And there've been a lot of deaths within the family, obviously, and friends and close relatives. But that one hit us hard because it was just out of nowhere. And then, my father, and then, my brother-in-law just passed away in November. That one, they're hurt my family, my wife's side of the family. It's something that they're currently still grieving with because it was so sudden. The guy was very healthy. And it was just so sudden. And like, the sudden ones, like, I know we're going to kind of talk about how to handle those kind of things, whereas, my father, we kind of knew something was going to be coming sooner rather than later. And then the sudden ones, like,
It's different.
yeah, like, is it, is there one that's different than the other, or is there like one that you might say like, or it's all the same, or the grieving period and stuff like that? Like, how do you even?
Do you want to talk about the Kubler-Ross or?
I mean, we can. So, there's the Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grief that is
Yes and no.
yes
right?
and no.
Yeah.
I would say there's no cookie cutter way to grieve.
Right.
Yeah.
And those sudden griefs are different than the prolonged, like anticipatory ones, right? So Kubler-Ross said that there's 5 stages of grief: bargaining, denial, anger, acceptance,
And then depression is the
depression.
last one.
Thank you. I always forget.
So they put like grief in 5 little boxes.
But you can't really put grief in
Right.
a box.
And it's interchangeable. Like, so you can have all 5 of those emotions in one day and just be like, that's normal. That's
You can go
okay.
back a stage. And
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
Or you could have
yes.
none at all. You
Yeah.
can skip
And just go
some.
straight to acceptance, So like, that's kind of like where that could have happened, like where that like this person is going to pass. And so when they do pass, you're a little depressed, but you're accepting it. So you don't, so this is where you really, like, I think in the sudden ones, you would really feel the 5 stages because you're going to get angry. You're not going to believe it. You're going to, beg and plead and ask God, why? Like, why did this happen? Or why is this happening to us? Or whatever. And then you're going to have to go through that acceptance and then the depression phase.
Go ahead.
I have a question. So like, what are some of the type of cases that you guys kind of deal with?
So I work at a dialysis unit, and are you guys familiar with how dialysis
Yeah.
is? So if for everyone who's watching, dialysis means that your kidneys are no longer functioning and that you're now going to a dialysis center. You might get it at home. You're hooked up to a machine on average 3.5 hours a day, 3 days a week. It's poking, it's prodding. When you're on dialysis, you're essentially actively dying. While you're still alive, you just have to come to terms with the fact that your kidneys are no longer working. If you stop getting dialysis, you're going to pass, unless you get a kidney transplant, which are few, right? There are not enough kidneys or donors to get kidneys, or by the grace of God, somehow, your kidneys regain function. So essentially, I deal with grieving patients all day, every day, because even though they're alive, they come in, they're smiling, they're happy. They know that at any moment their fluid could overload, their potassiums could skyrocket, they could have just a crazy freak incident where it just gets worse. And, you know, it's crazy because you see a trend, right? You know when someone is getting ready, like in the clinic. She worked in a dialysis clinic briefly too. So you can see someone's trend to going to that, right? And then like the family is more aware. And so I kind of have worked with, that's what I work with now. And that's the primary experience I have.
So do you
with that.
specifically work with the patient, or do you work with the family as well?
Both. It's not limited to just the patient, because the family is just as involved, if not more sometimes, than the patient is. So, and then Laura can touch on what she does.
I work with all different types of patients all over. But right now, yes, my focus is on oncology. So I see both ends of the spectrum. I see the people that have completed their chemo, and I have the people that have just been diagnosed. So there's a lot of grief all around, you know, because even if you completed chemo, you could be grieving like, what do you mean? I don't have to go back into the clinic and like see my nurses that I saw every single day. And same thing with dialysis, right? If you were fortunate enough to get a kidney, then you're going to, I've had some patients say, I kind of want to go back on. I kind of miss the clinic. I miss my friends, you know? And it happens. So, I mean, there's a lot of emotions are high anywhere you split it when it comes to a medical diagnosis or something sudden. I mean, no matter what, your emotions are going to be high, and that person ends up somewhere in the healthcare system. And Rabija and I, it's our job to kind of manage those emotions and say, well, what can we do to help you, and what can we do to kind of process this moment?
So you guys are just like, are you guys doing therapy with them?
Yes and no, because my role in my clinic isn't to do therapy. Like, sure, like if someone's having a crisis, I'm there to intervene. If someone's having a rough day, I'm there to talk to them. But do I see a patient every week for an hour? No. So, you know, I have like 160 patients in my clinic. And I'm split between 2 clinics. So I'm not in one place at all the time. So, you know, I connect them with the proper resources that they need for, you know, what they might be facing. I don't just address their mental health issues. It's water issues, it's housing, it's transportation, it's I don't have food, you know, it's all psychosocial barriers that you can imagine that someone might encounter.
Do you work with like caseworkers, or is it just...
It's me. I'm the social worker. But I mean, a lot of my patients, so my clinic's in the Metro Detroit area. So I work with the Detroit Area Agency on Aging. We don't work with PACE because they're strictly Henry Ford. But, you know, I do talk to them if a patient's going there. And then, you know, there's different organizations that within the community that I'll work with, or the insurance. And I'm sure you've noticed, do insurance call you a lot?
The insurance companies, a lot of people are fortunate enough to have case managers through their insurance. So that's another really good resource that's out there.
So they'll call me and then try to talk about the patient's, you know, care and stuff. So
I don't think you were able to answer the one about, you know.
Yeah, so I kind of wanted to, obviously they kind of touched on the death situation, but I wanted to am I low?
Yeah, you want
Okay,
a little bit.
Yeah, just
I wanted to mention a different perspective, in a sense of sudden doesn't necessarily have to be death. It could be also mourning someone that's alive that you lost, whether, because I remember like when I was in high school, I lost my whole friend group. So that changed me so much. I was mourning. We were in the same class, you know, for the next 2 years, and I was mourning them right in front of my face, where I literally lost myself. So I, like, whether it's death or whether it's sudden or whatever it may be, like, sometimes people say, like, mourning a death is easier than mourning someone that's still alive, because they're still alive, living their life, and you're not a part of it anymore.
Well, think about somebody who's in severe depression, right? And imagine like your spouse being in severe, like, I don't know if you guys are married, but if your spouse is in severe depression, or your partner, and technically you're grieving or mourning this person that you knew, and they're not that person that you knew, right? So that's kind of, you know, similar to what you had to go through, and friends do make a part of your identity. So I can totally understand that, because sometimes breaking off a friendship is harder than breaking off a relationship. Quite honestly.
For sure, definitely.
Whatever relationship it is, whether the
right.
you know, even family.
Right,
you know?
Right.
It's a mourning experience of any type of human interaction.
How do you cope with that when your friends kind of?
Well, I was obviously.
She was in
younger.
high school,
I was
right?
in high
That's
school,
so hard.
Would I care about that as much now? Maybe not, you know.
Yeah.
But like, I mean, it's just regardless, a person that was in my life, for instance, every single day that I relied on, and having that very close relationship, it was hard, especially seeing them every single day, and like like we were like known to be like the popular ones, and and like everybody knew, where teachers had to intervene, and like even the principal would notice. Like it was like a whole situation where it was embarrassing, like sad, and a whole like I just wanted to be left alone. And I remember I used to just avoid school as much as possible because I didn't want to be there, and I think that was the first time I actually like realized that like my like I developed more anxiety and everything like that. So how I coped was, I mean, eventually I learned dwelling is never the answer.
And to
Like,
love yourself. I think that's
Yeah.
where you blossom. Though.
for sure. And that's exactly what happened when I figured out myself, and I loved myself, and I figured out who I was. And it took time. But that was, I mean, I feel like everybody kind of has like a discovering story too.
Oh, definitely.
And especially in high school. So yeah, but like I said, like even mourning different people out of high school, whether it was even family members and stuff like that, like sometimes it's just it's like not that you never get over it, you just move on in a sense of like that's just, you need to go to the next chapter in your life.
Yeah.
I feel like your story was kind of like a catalyst to something better, because what your sister just said, you kind of bloomed, right?
And that's what you always
And
end
that's
up realizing too at the same
right.
time, because whatever is meant for you in your life will stay and will blossom with you, and if it's not, then that's just the end of an era.
Right. And I think that that's true with grief, is that we have these big losses in our lives, whether it's friendships, death, or loss of a job, and these can be huge catalysts to maybe even something bigger. Like we don't know our life's plans for, what's our trajectory or the path that we're supposed to be going down, but all we can just keep going is to see, well, what is going to happen now that this huge event just happened. It's going to shake my entire world.
Yep.
And sometimes it's for the better.
It's always usually for the better. It's always usually
For
the
sure.
better.
Yeah.
For sure.
So you kind of asked her the next question that we did have, which is basically healthy ways to cope.
You go, Black Coco.
She's good.
We're all
she's
healthy.
good. Yeah. So like, what are some healthy ways for people to cope with grief or loss? You want to go ahead and start then on this one?
We actually touched on this yesterday, and we were saying that anything that doesn't cause harm to yourself or anybody around you, right? So whether it be journaling, meditating, going to the gym, hanging out with your friends, seeking help, talking to a therapist, calling a crisis center, like anything that you feel is right for you, then you should do it, as long as it's not harming you or someone, around you. So if you feel like you need to cry, you need to cry, right? Like people always say like, oh, don't cry. It's not good to bottle up those emotions. Like whoever you are, man or woman, you need to, non-binary, whatever, you need to cry, you need to let it out. So that's something that we talked on yesterday, and really it's just whatever feels right to you.
Did you want to add on anything to that as well?
I mean, it's pretty much the same. I would just say even the unconventional things, the weird things that make you as a person, right? Don't feel ashamed to, like, if you feel like you want to laugh about something, like sometimes when I get bad news, I smile because I don't know what to do with my face, and people are like, what are you doing? Like I could be giving you the worst news of my own personal life, and I could be smiling, and they're like, what is happening? But that's okay, right? Yeah. And I think that even doing whatever activity you need to do in that moment that will bring you joy or bring you peace, then do it. If it's not hurting yourself or hurting others, it's fine.
And not feel guilty about it. Because like if you see that everyone around you, like if it's a loss, for example, and your entire family is grieving, but you're like, I'm feeling okay because I just journaled, or I just listened to my favorite podcast or my favorite playlist or whatever. That's okay. Like if that's what you're doing to get over it, then that's what you need to do in order to feel better.
Yeah, I think that's where kind of like the conflict happens, because certain people expect you to mourn or
on their time.
Like in a certain way too.
Yeah.
And what if your way of grieving is doing something that person liked to do? You know what I'm saying? And what if what if you want to be alone?
Right.
Like in our culture, people come over.
Yes.
You know?
A lot of people come over.
Yeah.
I know. And it's like
And-
the 45 days and you got to get back together again.
Listen.
I know.
And it's like, leave me alone.
I know.
I remember when my dad passed away, like we didn't even talk to each other, like the
Like
boys
for
and the
2
girls.
weeks. Like,
I know.
We didn't get to even
because
see each
people are
other.
coming over.
Yeah.
But I think that's just our culture. Like when someone's sick, what do? You
Yeah.
flood their house,
Yeah.
right? You don't send a little care package. You flood their house and you're like, oh my God, you're sick. I feel so bad. And this person's like lying there, like
Just wash
you know,
my dishes, please. There's a
right?
laundry
Do
room,
my
you know,
laundry. Do something, you know.
No, I understand.
But yeah, I get it. I
So,
do.
I know. Is there any like toxic ways of mourning? Do you guys think, or
I think you need to rephrase that. Do you get it?
Yeah, I mean,
like
the next question is like, what happens, that when people don't address the grief in their life, what are some things that can happen?
Is that what you meant?
Or
more of like, is there a way, like, let's say, okay, say like there's someone that's very important in your life. They're still alive, right? But they're very important in your life. But you don't have that relationship with them anymore.
Okay.
And say, but you don't talk about it. Is that considered toxic, or do you need like, you know what I mean?
Talk about
I
it
don't
with
know.
who? With them?
With that person, yeah. Do you is
So,
it
like,
okay
do you
to
feel
separate
like-
yourself from
Oh.
this person?
So like you've had do you understand or do you want me to
No.
clarify? Okay. So you've had this person in your life
Yes.
for a very long
Yes.
time, but you feel like your relationship is no longer the
Yes.
same. I think you need to address that.
So okay.
Not you.
But what
whoever
if-
that is.
Yeah.
I know. I'm
Yeah.
saying okay.
Sorry.
but what if it is addressed? What if it is
Yeah,
addressed
what if it's just broken?
and it's just not working?
So does this person purpose you? Does this person serve you? Does their purpose serve you?
Do they bring joy or add
Right.
fulfillment to
Why
your
are
life?
they in your
I guess
life?
that's a good-
Or are they taking more away?
I'm saying
Right.
like with their family. Like that's what I'm pushing it to that extent. You know what I'm
it's a
saying?
family member
Yeah.
that the relationship is
Yeah.
no longer there.
Yeah.
Is it like are both ends aware that it's no longer there?
Yeah.
So I would just cut ties.
And just wait
It's-
for the best.
It's hard
It is
Yeah.
hard.
because it's family, right?
Yeah.
So you're gonna see them anywhere.
Yeah.
But I think that having a sit down adult conversation, because my biggest thing is communication. Like you can never over communicate.
But what if the person doesn't comprehend what you're communicating? You know what I mean? If they don't
Yeah, I get it.
comprehend- Yeah.
Rabija is about to charge for this advice. She's about to charge. This advice is getting
No, it's
deep.
because it like when you lose someone through death, it's so different
I
because
know,
they're not
yeah.
here anymore, right?
Right.
But when a person that's like in your life and it's hard. So
It
it's
is.
just like you want to be better. Everybody wants to strive to be like the best version of themselves, but sometimes like you just gotta do what you gotta do.
I think it comes back to you can only control your own behaviors
Yeah.
and your
Yeah.
feelings,
Yeah.
right? So I would just
Yes.
build those internal boundaries within yourself, and all you do is you.
Yeah.
I don't think it's toxic if you or that individual is aware of what your limits are, and if you're cordial, if you've tried speaking to the person, if you've tried to have a conversation like, this is what's bothering me, like we need to work on this, or whatever the scenario might be, that's not toxic.
Okay.
But like, I think toxicity would be being a bad person to that person.
Yeah, or wishing
Purposely, or wishing them ill.
Yeah.
Ill
Yeah.
well,
them, or I'm trying
yeah.
to make their lives harder.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
going out of their way to
Yeah,
kind of.
yeah.
But
make
if
you
you're
feel
just
bad.
being cordial, like you said, your piece, like that's all you can do then at that point. Like,
Yeah.
and
I
just
agree.
grieve and mourn the relationship, what could have been, what should have been, and move on. Keep your peace.
I like that. Where's the round of applause? Come on.
Yeah. Rabija and Laura didn't know that this is actually a therapy session for our family.
A live one. So
A live therapy session. But the next question is, I guess, when people don't address their grief in their lives, I guess, what are some of the things that can happen? I mean, maybe you can start off with that one, Laura.
I think it's hit or miss because what I was talking about with Rabija is that each grief is going to feel different based off that relationship. And what I know about grief is it's an extension of love.
Yeah.
So I think in my own personal life, I had a sudden death. When I was 15, my stepdad passed away suddenly. And then a month later, my grandpa died. And I never grieved my grandpa. And I still haven't grieved my grandpa. It's been 15 years and I still haven't. And I don't feel kind of any sort of need to. It was just kind of like boom, boom, death, death. There's no way I could just do a double whammy grieving session after that. So I think that scenario, that's okay. And I think that for that person, if they're not addressing their grief or they're just kind of hiding it, I would watch behaviors after that. If it wasn't like in my type of situation where I didn't even have the emotional wherewithal to grieve again, if it was just like you had this huge grief happen and you're not even acknowledging it, I would watch that person's behaviors, because actions speak louder than words, right? So I might not be talking about it, but maybe my day-to-day functioning has changed a lot. And that goes back to kind of like relying on your support system to kind of
Like sleeping during the day, maybe the grades get lower, maybe they're,
Angry.
No, but
Angry.
Even like, for instance, with our father's passing, I feel like because we talked about we kind of knew what was gonna go on or whatever it was happening. So to be honest with you, like the sadness of it at that time was so much like it was not easy, but like it was like, okay, obviously I was emotional, stuff like that, but it didn't hit me hard until, because my sister was getting married, so she ended up getting married 2 weeks after, and it was like we sleep in the same room and whatever. So it was like I was mourning that, and then I mourned that of her leaving, obviously, which she's like next door now and stuff like that. But it didn't hit me until that was like June, July, and summertime, so we're always out and about and blah blah blah. But it did not hit me hard until like November, December, at that time where I felt like I was mourning, not even just mourning, like as if it happened at that time for me. And it was obviously because like, what is it called? Seasonal depression and all that stuff. So you could be sad at that moment and get over it the next day. But again, it could happen all over again to you months later, years later, or whatever it may be.
You can be sad like at that moment, like you said, but if you don't actually acknowledge those feelings and process what you went through, then it's going to keep coming back up.
Yeah.
So, it could come out in different ways.
Because you can even mourn a move. When we moved out of our family home, oh my God, like the other day, we just recently, last summer, I went to go check the mail just in case or whatever, and like I started crying because I'm just like, this is the house, and brought back memories of my dad and just everything. So
I don't like going down the street.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's totally normal.
very normal. I'm gonna lose my mind when I move out of my first place, so
yeah,
I feel
Yeah.
it.
because our first home, my grandma still lives there.
Oh.
It was just so it's like it's gone. You know how it's like gone.
Yeah.
Like somebody else is gonna be living there.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's weird.
It's not weird. It's okay.
My dad actually, when we moved out of one of our places, they had an open house, right? And he went in, he's like, I used to live here. And they're like, come on in. And so it was really sweet. So maybe they'll let you do that.
Yeah.
When you're in a good place, when you're ready.
Yeah.
This is a great conversation so far. I think it's a good time for us to take like a halfway break. Give a second shout out to our second sponsor of today, which is BC Adhesives. So Ramsey, if you can, go ahead and run that BC Adhesives ad. Our great friends over there out there in Wisconsin. So shout out to BC Adhesives, and we're going to keep it going. I hope you're enjoying this at home. Again, shout out to BC Adhesives. BC Adhesives. You can go to BC Adhesives for all your industrial adhesives needs. They do food packaging, book binding, product assembly, and many other industrial services. So if you are in need of adhesives for your business or having trouble with your current adhesives applications, you can contact them by phone 1-888-679-9825 or go on their website www.bcadhesives.com. All right, we are officially back. Ramsey, I think I messed with you too much. I'm sorry, man. Can you actually move it back just a little bit more now towards Sada? I think we moved a little bit too much, but wanted to just adjust the camera. We're halfway through again. Today's conversation is about grief and loss. If you are just coming in and tuning in, we just got done talking about what happens if people don't address the grief or loss in their life. So my next question is there a specific moment, you feel like people should really seek help if they're not grieving well after a loss or a tragic moment in their lives? Like, if it's like 5 years down the line, is there like a number? I know you mentioned that you got to see their patterns and see how they're reacting. But is there like a time period where you'd be like, okay, this happened. They should be better now. We should be a little concerned with what's going on. We could let you start off on this one.
There's definitely no time frame. I think first and foremost, you should seek help if you're feeling super like depressed to the point where you want to hurt yourself or hurt someone else, that's first and foremost. But like we said, if like she mentioned, like if you like watch the person's patterns, or like if you find yourself like struggling your day-to-day basis, like, oh, I can't go to work, I'm too sad, or not cooking or cleaning or doing laundry, like we all get lazy, right? But if it's like a repetitive pattern thing and it's intruding in your thoughts and it's consuming you essentially, then your grief has turned into complicated grief at this point, which I think there's like a statistic that affects like 20 to 25% of grievers, but I'm sure it's higher than that, right? Then that's when you should definitely seek help from somewhere, someone, something, right? So.
And when you say that, like, let's say you see somebody struggling, like, how, as a family member, can you address that situation? Do you try to seek professional help, or do you try to help them? And what is it that you would tell the person if they're, you know, you could see that they're not doing their normal day-to-day activities? Like, what would be a good way to address that?
I think just sitting them down and having like the uncomfortable conversation, like, hey, I've noticed like you're doing XYZ. Is everything okay? Do you want to talk about something? Like, is there anything I can do for you? Like, try to make yourself, I know it sounds exhausting. It can be exhausting to make yourself even more readily available to that person. And then, you know, talking to them about seeking help or how they feel about it, or talking to somebody, because there's so many resources out there, like for therapy or group therapy, or even online. You can, there's like apps to download to coping with grief. Like, you can get therapy in your pocket essentially. So.
I think that the big thing is that you don't ever want to shame that person for how they're acting too, and you really want to just be very open with them and not make it so accusatory, like, I've noticed you've been doing this or you've been doing that, or da-da-da-da. You're not acting like yourself, but instead coming from a place with compassion in your heart. And that's another thing is you can't force someone to seek help. Most of the time you can't.
Right.
But the receptiveness to want to change or want to be better comes from within here. And sometimes as family and friends, what we can do is just being there for that person sometimes is enough.
And I think it's okay to like not get discouraged if like you have this conversation with a person and they're like, no, I don't need help, I'm fine, you know, and then they like walk away from you, like not receptive at all to your conversation. Something of what you said might resonate with them and they might come back to it and like, and like, don't be surprised if like a day or two or even a week later, like they come back to you like, okay, you're right. Like what you said stuck out to me. Like they might acknowledge their behaviors, or they might acknowledge like what they're thinking or feeling, and then, you know, agree or say, yes, let's take the next step, or how can I get help or whatever. But yeah.
Great points. Y'all want to add on anything to that one too, or?
No, that was well said.
Sada, do you want to say anything else about that?
I'm
Good.
gonna agree with that.
I don't have any more scenarios.
No.
It's okay. We welcome them with open arms.
Thank you. And so my next question, you mentioned there are ways or help out there. How can people seek professional help if it's possible? You mentioned apps. Maybe you want to give names out there and stuff like that, like places people can go. And
well, I mean, if you're in a crisis and you feel like you're having like a mental health emergency, you can always call Access. They have Access too.
Yeah, I was gonna say that.
Yeah, but the Detroit Wayne Integrated Health Network, they service Wayne County residents where they will provide, you know, crisis intervention. We can say their phone number out loud right now if you want, or, you know, you can even look it up. You know, Laura and I are tagged on Instagram, so if anybody has anything, they could always reach out to us. We can connect them with resources. Your insurance is always a good place to start, because everything in this country depends on what kind of insurance you have and what is available to you. So it's just as easy as plugging things into your phone, honestly. Just depends.
do you want to add on any more to that, or?
I would say the big thing is probably using your insurance is what I usually guide people to doing, because what I like about it is you can search that person and search if it's a therapist that you're looking for, or even a support group. There's different, support groups aren't covered by insurance. Those are just, you just walk in and do your thing. But if you're looking for a therapist, definitely go on your insurance company's website, and then it'll come up a list of names, and they'll tell you what their credentials are, if they're accepting new clients or not, and then you can kind of search their webpage to see if that person kind of melts with your values and what you're looking for.
I have a question. Would you guys ever do like school social work?
I actually thought about it. Yeah.
No, I kind of want you to come work with our department. I was gonna just tell you guys after the camera.
I actually thought
work
about
with,
it.
Domestic. My specific department is domestic violence survivors.
Oh.
Yeah.
Bless
so
your heart.
I was gonna try to roll you guys in more. You guys know, because we need some therapists. So.
Yeah. School social work. She's like, don't steal. I'm just
Yeah,
kidding.
no, I'm saying there's a difference between a therapist and a social worker.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
But
But it's kind of
yeah.
interchangeable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
we take
So,
social workers as therapists as well.
yeah. Yeah. And a lot of therapists are social workers.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I actually, a lot of my friends, when they like need therapy, and I'm like, they're like, oh, I need a psychiatrist or a psychologist. I'm like, no, you don't. I'm like, get yourself a social worker.
Yeah, no, most
Not
of
no
our-
hate to them, but it's just I feel like we're more like we look at the big picture, right?
Yeah.
And our training is different. So
100%.
Yeah.
No, I loved all my social workers that I had
Yeah.
throughout the years in school. They make a big difference.
I wanted to be a social worker, like get my master's in it, but I don't know. I got my bachelor's in sociology as well.
Oh,
Okay.
really?
Yeah,
So go back for your master's.
we'll see. We'll see.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
So you said you can't see yourself becoming I mean, you might be interested in being a social worker in a school building.
Yeah.
Why are you interested in that?
Well, I've been in the healthcare for so long, and it's kind of depressing, to be honest. I mean, and then working with adults for so long, I'm kind of ready to venture out into a different,
Age group.
Yeah. And
sick adults at that.
I'm sorry?
And sick adults.
Sick
at
adults,
that.
yeah,
It's a whole
yeah.
other.
Yes. So I've thought about it. I've actually transparently looked at a couple places too. And it's just, as a mom, it's kind of convenient, right? Because you get the summers off, or at least some summer off. When school's closed, you're home. So that would work out perfectly with children. So, yeah.
When he started preschool, I started becoming a para. And then I ended up,
okay.
I never wanted to teach. I actually wanted to go in social work. I did my pre-social work. I got my associates in pre-social work. And then they offered this grant for teaching. And I was like, you know what? I'm here. We're here together. Like, it was easier in that aspect. Than
It just works out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that.
10 years later, I'm still
So my next question is, any shocking statistics, like any stats that, like, with grief and loss, that someone may, it could be rather if it's through relationships or, people dealing with grief, like how many people deal with it in a family when somebody passes away in that family. Any shocking stats that may, it might be eye-popping or anything like that you may want to share with us?
Yeah. So obviously COVID has been going on for the last 3 years. Things are finally getting back to normal now. And there's a recent study that was done that over 57% of America is grieving, the loss of somebody. That's crazy. That's half of the country, more than half the country is grieving the loss of someone. And it's estimated that 2.5 million people die a year. And for every person that dies, at least 5 people are grieving that person. So it makes you think,
Just be nice.
Yeah.
You know what people are going
Yeah.
through.
Yeah.
It's so sad.
I mean, there's 6 of us technically here now, but one of us is technically grieving, right? At least, if you look at it this way. Now think about a big room of 30, 40, 50 people. So. it's a
Okay, I
lot.
have something just came in my head right now.
Yeah.
Can you, I think you can, but grieving someone that you've never met, that should have been in your life.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was not fortunate enough for my grandparents, right? So my mom's dad passed away before I was born. I was born on his 45th day. So we say Četiriesnica. So I was born on that day. And my mom's mom passed away right when we came here to America. My dad's dad passed away when I was 5, and my dad's mom passed away when I was 13, but I was so young, I can barely remember anything. And I grieve those relationships all the time because
You see other people.
yeah, I never had that relationship with a grandparent. I don't know them, right? Like I can faintly remember my grandmother, but like I don't know what it's like. Like I want to know what they went through in life, like what their struggles were. I want to hear their stories. And that's something that I'm still grieving, right? You know, like the other day my coworker was telling me like her grandmother, she's in her 40s. Her grandmother passed away. I'm like, you're in your 40s and your grandmother passed away.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm in my 20s and I don't know any of my grandparents. Like, be thankful. You know, I'm not trying to like,
Yeah.
you know,
Downplay it,
downplay it, but it's like, you know, try to look on
You
the
got a taste
positive
of it.
side. Yeah, like look on the positive side. Like you're well into your adult age and you were able to have this relationship. That's beautiful, right? So that is completely normal. Or like moms who have miscarriages.
Yeah.
That's huge too, right?
Oh
so
my God, yes.
yeah, you're grieving a baby that could have, should have, would have been, you know, and so that's totally normal. That's totally okay.
Are there numbers out there like with guys and ladies who grieves more or?
It's always the competition.
I want to know like because like guys tend to act like they're.
I was about to say, you guys don't talk about your emotions well
Yeah.
enough
Right.
out here for us to
It
get
wouldn't be valid.
I know it would not be because statistically, I was looking. It says women grieve more, but how accurate is that, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So I
Don't
don't.
speak about it.
Yeah, you guys don't talk about it. They're like,
Why?
I'm fine.
Do you know why?
It's a taboo. It's culture. What do you mean? It's not common for men to, like, how many times in your life have you cried in front of your wife?
Not a lot.
Exactly.
That's
I cry
true.
in front of my husband. Like I'll watch like a rom-com and I'm like, oh, you know. So it's unfortunately women are more emotional. It's just our hormones. It's how we're structured and wired. But
I think it's more accepted for us to.
yeah,
express
definitely,
ourselves, yeah.
definitely. But
If
I
we
think
don't, it's like, oh,
yeah,
You're cold-hearted.
like women are like shunned if we're not emotional enough, but we're shunned if we're too emotional. So yeah,
You can never win.
we can't. We can't. But
We're the ones that are holding our emotions.
oh
in,
God.
You know what I mean?
And then you guys
That
have all
weight
these,
on your shoulder.
I was just about to say, and then you guys are all angry and pent up.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, no, I really was wondering if there were like statistics on that.
They're
Yeah.
false.
Oh, no matter what. That's why they probably weren't shared because they're probably
They
false
weren't.
information.
Because when you look at it, I'm sorry to cut you off,
No, you're
but
good.
you're looking at it and it like, how many times have you taken a survey and you're not being 100% truthful,
Yeah.
right?
I try to be.
You
I
try.
try to be.
You are the
I
only
don't.
one that.
Right.
I
I
don't.
was gonna say, it's
I'm
Especially if
bad.
it's anonymous. Hell yeah, I'm gonna be, be honest.
Yeah, but like some people, like I've taken a survey once where I've stared at a question and it's hit me and I'm like, ooh, I didn't even know I felt that way, right?
More like lying to yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're telling yourself a narrative, like I'm okay, and then you're looking at this question and you're like, I'm not okay, but this survey, if I circle that I'm okay, it's gonna make me feel like I'm okay,
Yeah.
right? So that's how do you think that these studies are done? It's surveys
Yeah.
and majority. And so many people probably also fib on it. Not saying it's a bad thing to fib, but they're not reliable.
Yeah. No, I'm for sure. Anytime I need a review or something, I'm always giving like the positives
Yeah.
quickly, just the fours.
It usually comes at the end when you're trying to leave or you're trying
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or
Sure.
like some people, like it would be, it's not, yeah, it wouldn't be uncommon for someone to answer questions a certain way if they're taking a survey to get results, because they might find validation in those results. They might be like, oh, wow, yeah, see, this survey told me I'm okay. So I'm fine, you know?
That's true.
So, yeah.
Do you like with grief and loss? How does it like correlate with like mental health issues, or maybe leading into maybe mental health issues, or is that something that's not fair to discuss because it doesn't have like enough research on it, or like how much does grief and loss can lead to like I said, mental health issues or anything like that?
I don't know if there's like really a statistic for that because I don't know how well you could really measure it.
Right.
But I going back to what we were saying about how grief can be a catalyst for things, and most of the time it's for good, but it could be for something like you could end up in a psychiatric hospital
Right.
because you were trying to hurt yourself.
Mhm.
You could maybe that is the catalyst to like you kind of had this underlining maybe anxiety before and it was kind of like down here, and then all of a sudden your death happened in your life or grief or loss or whatever it may be, and now your anxiety's at a 20,
Yeah.
and it's constantly at a 20, and it won't go back down. So, I mean, grief can be a catalyst for bigger things that were kind of maybe underlining before, but now it's even worse.
Yeah, so
because-
it can be what causes you to seek out the help that you probably never thought you needed.
Yeah.
Because think about all the stress and burdens that we carry in our everyday lives and all the things that we've endured, you know? And then all of a sudden a major loss or something happens and then you're like, oh, I'm at my breaking point. I can't do this anymore, you know?
And then other ways that people should not deal with grief, you know, obviously, just want to make sure it's out there because I don't think I got a chance to touch on it. Like, you know, things like drinking or smoking, those are not positive things that you would
Or
want
avoiding
people,
it all day
you know.
I didn't hear you.
or avoiding it.
Yeah. I mean, technically drinking and smoking is harming yourself.
Oh, yeah, that's what you did say.
You
that.
know,
You did
so
say that.
it's not. And then it's like drugs, you know, you're escaping
It's
something.
escape.
Yeah, and you're not facing your. Now, if you were a smoker before, you know, like cigarettes, right? What does a smoker do when they're stressed out? They smoke more,
Yeah.
right? So they're just puffing one after the other. What are you doing? You're just causing more harm to yourself.
Yeah.
So,
Great
or a
point.
drinker, if you're an alcoholic and you're having a stressful day, what are you going to do? You're going to go drown yourself in a bottle.
Or even like, let's say before the death or before the loss, you were maybe a social drinker, but now you're drinking more heavily after the grief. That could be, okay, now I have an alcoholic. Now I can't get up to go to work. I'm skipping work. It's affecting my life areas, my life domains. Maybe I should be seeking help.
These are all great points. Again, today's topic was about grief and loss. We have entered the part where we want to give advice for anybody. And so what we usually do now is, you know, because the camera is so much more clear, if we just recorded right here from our phones. So my sister is going to be pulling out her phone to record you guys from here. Obviously, this camera and everything, we're still live as well. But this is the clip that we like to pull out, you know, just to let people know on Instagram that we had a show about this topic. So I guess really it's very simple. Advice for someone who is grieving and having a hard time dealing with
Do you want me to do it
the
like
loss. Yeah, so we go one by one. Yeah, we can do close up. So basically advice for someone, if you had to like kind of wrap up everything that you pretty much talked about today, Rabija, is what advice would you tell someone that has a hard time dealing with grief? And then Laura, you're going to be next as well.
So definitely my advice would be to not feel like your grief doesn't matter or that it's not big enough to grieve. So if you're feeling like you're not yourself, then definitely acknowledge those emotions and get the help that you need, whether that help just be to journal or go for a run or work out or do something. Just do it, you know, and that your grief matters and your grief is okay. It's completely okay. It's not discredited by any means.
Great. And then Laura, same question for you. What advice would you tell someone who's struggling with grief or dealing with their grief?
I would say the big thing is that grief is an extension of love, and no two griefs are going to feel the same. In my experience, they never have. And so what you're feeling for one grief and loss is going to feel completely different for something else, because with each relationship, we have a different type of love for each other. And it is completely normal to feel the way you're feeling and feel the way you're feeling in that moment. Give yourself space and allow yourself patience and kindness when you are feeling these incredibly hard feelings. Just kind of ride the wave through it and everything will be chill.
It'll be okay in the end. If it's not okay, it's not the end.
That's right.
I like that.
I love that.
No, I love
Should have had that recorded too.
You want to do it again?
You guys want to give a round of applause too, by the way. Great answers. Great
I love
points.
that.
when
Okay,
you
it's not the
say grief is an extension of love. I love that.
It truly is. That's what I believe.
No, that's a positive way of looking
Yeah,
at
it
it. So, like you when you grieve and you think of it like that, you'd be like, you know, I'm just because I love this person a
you
lot.
care, yeah.
And
You
I think
know?
it's a really normal part of your life, right?
Yeah.
So the more we normalize it, the more we acknowledge that everybody's going to go through it, then the more we can understand it better.
Yeah.
And move forward and hopefully address it the right way. We had a couple stuff written in Arabic, and I'm not even going to sit here and read it right here. Then thank you. My wife said thank you for normalizing that sudden death can include 5 stages within 1 day. That was earlier in the conversation as well. I do want to say, again, this was season 2, episode 23 of Motivate Me 313's podcast. We talked about grief and loss. You know, we had Laura and Rabija and on the show today. Both are clinical social workers. Again, shout out to our sponsors, the Balkan House, Hanley International Academy, Qahwa House, and BC Adhesives. Be sure to subscribe to our pages and follow our pages, YouTube Oz Media, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok under Oz Media. You can listen to the show later on Apple and Spotify podcasts under Oz Media. So, again, be sure to follow, like, subscribe. This is the segment where, you know, final word, final comments, final advice, final anything you'd like to say. Laura, we can even start off with you with this one. Any final comments you want to throw out there? You know, websites, things that people can follow you, or places that can probably help them. Anything you want to mention?
The one thing that I don't think we touched on too much is children in grief. And I would say if you do have a child who is grieving, the best way is not to sit the child down and talk about it, but instead to do things like play and activities, like different games, and because kids act out their feelings through play. So that would be my last thing that I don't really think
That's good to know,
we
especially
had the chance to say. Yeah.
first graders.
Yeah.
Because they come in sometimes confused about things that are happening at home.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like confused too because they're giving me bits and pieces.
Mm-hmm.
So I just try to give them the best experience they can at school, just so, you know, because
What are they
I
getting
can't control.
emotional?
I can't
It's
control.
like
got me so emotional.
I would say
Yeah.
Pinterest. Pinterest has some good,
Oh, yeah.
even like you can do like grief and loss, like crafts or games on Pinterest, and it'll all come up.
Yeah, like you said, like you see a child at school, and that could be those 8 hours of normalcy for them, and that's kind of sad to think about.
100%.
Yeah, but touching on children and and grief, I think that as a child, like if I were to be faced with a loss, or tomorrow if my kids are faced with a loss, I think I would try to instill more traditions with them to memorialize and remember the person that was lost, right? So whether that be visiting the gravesite or on holidays or birthdays or on the anniversary of the death or something, just making sure that they don't forget this individual and that they're processing it, but acknowledging it is definitely important, because it doesn't matter if a child is 5 or 10 or 12, like they're aware of what's going on. So
I love it. And do you want to add on any more final words
I
from
think
that?
that's it. I think
Thank you
we've
guys
got
so
everything.
much.
Yeah, no
Thank
problem.
you.
Yeah.
Your presence.
This was great. Abir and Sada, did you guys want to say anything else or anything you wanted to add?
I'm glad I got to meet you guys.
Yeah.
No, this was a really great conversation.
For sure. Well, again, we hope that you enjoyed it. It's an important conversation that we wanted to have. Wanted to make sure that you guys enjoyed and also maybe learn something from it, and obviously share it. Share it with maybe family members that might be struggling, someone that you know, close relative, friends. So feel free to share this conversation. We wanted to, address it in a way where it wasn't, too sorrow, but more so ways that, we had to address it. We had to address it. If it's uncomfortable things, uncomfortable topics, we had to do it. So thank you again, Laura and Rabija. We really do appreciate it. We hope that you enjoyed it at home.